Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Fatal Liaison. Irish detectives investigate a cold-blooded murder. By David Pearson. Narrated by Roger Clark. Chapter 1. Detective Inspector Aidan Burke was seated at his desk in Store Street Garda Station. It had been a busy week for the Gardaí. They had had all sorts to deal with, from the usual robberies, suicides in the Liffey, drug seizures, and quite a number of domestic assaults, as well as a gangland shooting. With most of it in the process of being sorted out, Burke was enjoying a few minutes of relative peace. Then his phone rang. "Burke," he said. "Hello, Aidan. This is Superintendent Heffernan. Glad I caught you." "Hello, sir. How can I help?" "I've had a call from Tala. A car has gone into the ditch in a laneway off the N81. When the uniformed Gardaí were called out, they found what appears to be the driver dead at the wheel. But they're not happy that it was just an accident. They're very pressed today. There's some sort of demonstration going on at the square. Could you drop out and lend a hand?" "Yes, okay, sir, I'll go right away. Who should I contact for directions to the scene?" Burke said. "Good man, Aidan. If you give Sergeant O'Grady a ring in Tala, he has the details. Oh, and keep me posted, won't you?" "Yes, of course, sir. Talk later." D.I. Aidan Burke had just recently turned 50. He had contemplated retiring early from the force to try and get his life straightened out, but had been persuaded by his sergeant, Fiona Moore, not to take such a radical step. Since his divorce he had been drinking far too much, and generally not looking after himself. But when Moore discovered, quite by accident, that he was thinking of throwing in the towel, they had had a heart-to-heart, and she had agreed to help him make some changes in his lifestyle. So far it was working. He had reduced his alcohol intake by about 2/3. He had smartened up his appearance, and with Moore's help had given his rather humble bachelor house in Crumlin a complete makeover. Feeling more positive about life in general, he had agreed to postpone any decision about retirement for a couple of years, to see how things went. He had to admit that he enjoyed being a relatively senior detective in Dublin, and he was good at his job. He had an excellent record, and although his methods were frequently controversial, to say the least, they were nevertheless effective. Burke found Detective Sergeant Fiona Moore at her desk, updating the Garda Pulse system with details from the work that they had completed earlier in the week. "Come on, Sergeant, we need to go out," Burke said to her. Moore locked the screen of her PC, grabbed her jacket from the back of her chair, and followed Burke out of the office. On the way to the car park, Moore said to Burke, "What's the gig, boss?" "Heffernan was on to me. There's some shit gone down between Tala and Blessington. I don't have many details, but it involves a car crash. Sergeant O'Grady from Tala is sending me the map reference." "What do they need us for?" Moore said. "Who knows? But I need to build some brownie points with Heffernan, so I'm not arguing, am I?" "Okay, whatever." Moore had joined the Gardaí some years back, hoping to find a husband. She had been unlucky in love during her teen years, and on the advice of her mother she had joined the force, where she was assured there were tons of hard-working, good-looking young men to be had. She had lost some weight and let her chestnut hair grow a good bit longer, so she was quite attractive by the time she arrived in Store Street from training in Templemore. Initially she had hooked up with a more senior officer, but unbeknownst to her he was already married, and when she found that out, she was furious. But she also found that she was enjoying the work quite a lot, so, as time went by, she changed her objectives, being happier to focus on a career and set her romantic aspirations aside, at least temporarily. Burke had recently acquired a new, unmarked Volvo S60. It was quite luxurious for a police car, but such a vehicle was necessary to keep up with the fancy hardware currently used by many criminals in and around Dublin. It was mid-morning, and the early frost had thawed to a damp slickness on the city streets. As they drove out past Tala, They left behind the densely packed terraces and vast estates of small houses, where the names of those who fought for Irish independence had been liberally scattered about in the form of street names. The men had been immortalized on the rectangular green and white signs affixed to the low walls at the entrance to the estates. Porrick Pierce Park, James Connolly Crescent, and Michael Collins Road. The land rose up steeply on the N81, and the terrain became quite densely wooded, with small patches of slowly thawing snow lying along the verges of the road where the trees were shading the grass. O'Grady had sent the coordinates of the location to Burke's phone, and it had appeared on the display in the centre console of his car, with directions being provided by Google Maps. Just before Gortenham Cottages, Burke turned right onto a narrow road known locally as McDonough's Lane. After a few twists and turns, they came across an unmarked Ford Mondeo with blue flashing lights at the side of the road. A little further on there was a black BMW 5 Series that had left the road and had hit a tree. Both the driver's and front passenger's doors of the stricken vehicle were open, but the car was badly smashed, the bonnet having folded upwards in a sharp inverted V, and the windscreen was cracked and crazed. Burke brought his Volvo to a halt. "Here we go," he said, getting out of the car. The detectives walked over to where two uniformed Gardaí were standing, looking cold and a bit miserable, beside the damaged BMW. Burke introduced himself and Moore, holding out his warrant card. "Well, men, what's the story?" "Good morning, sir, Sergeant. We were called out about an hour ago to this," the uniformed Garda said, gesturing to the BMW. "At first we thought it was just a straightforward car crash, but when we got to look at the driver, we began to think there was a bit more to it. He's been sick all over his clothes, and, well, sorry, sir, he's messed himself as well." Burke leaned into the vehicle and examined the driver, who was slumped forward over the steering wheel. Burke placed two fingers against the man's neck and determined that life had left him. There was no pulse. The driver was in his 50s, dressed smartly in a suit and tie, but his clothes were now soaked in vomit. His plentiful hair, going grey, was neatly cut, and his clothes weren't cheap. The interior of the car smelled strongly of cigar smoke, and there was a partly burnt fat Havana in the ashtray, which had strangely stayed in place during the trauma. Burke withdrew himself from the vehicle, feeling slightly nauseous. "Have you run the number on the car?" he asked the young Garda standing close by. No, sir, we were waiting for someone to arrive," the man said rather sheepishly. Having overheard Burke, Moore said, "I'm on it, boss, just coming through now." A moment later she spoke up again. "The vehicle is registered to a Mr. Gerald McCranny, and I have an address here too, but it looks like a business address," she said. "Right, better get on to O'Higgins, get his mob out, then. These guys were right. This isn't just an old RTA." Dr. Malcolm O'Higgins was the state pathologist who worked with the Gardaí when dead bodies were found. He was a serious, humourless man in his late 50s, and he always wore a grey suit which matched his grey complexion. He never looked well fed, and his clothes hung limply on his emaciated frame to the extent that one wondered if he wasn't near death himself. However, he was a good pathologist, totally thorough and well used to finding tiny morsels of evidence that would have slipped past a more lackadaisical person. The Gardaí were pleased to have his dedicated services. Moore made the call and reported that O'Higgins would be out within the hour along with 2 or 3 of his assistants. He urged the detectives not to interfere in any way with the body or the scene until he was on hand. "Tell you what, lads, why don't you two pop down to the village and get us all a nice hot cup of coffee and a few buns? Here, this should cover it," Burke said, handing the young Garda standing nearby a €20 note. The uniformed Garda didn't have to be asked twice. The two of them got into their blue Mondeo, turned it, and drove off towards Blessington in search of refreshments. "Right, Come on, Fiona. Let's have a good look around before O'Higgins gets here. Burke and Moore donned blue vinyl gloves and approached the BMW. You look in the back, and in the boot. I'll take the front, Burke said. After a few minutes, Moore came around to where Burke was standing on the passenger side of the car, leaning in, going through the contents of the glove box. Aidan, I found this file on the back seat. Looks like something to do with construction. Good. There's bugger all up front, and it's not very nice in there. See if you can get a phone number from the file for his business and give him a call. Try and get his home number from them. There's no point in postponing the inevitable, I suppose. By the way, why do you think the passenger door is open? Dunno. Maybe it sprang open in the crash, Moore said. Ah, that's not the way it works. And look here. There are muddy footprints on the floor mat on that side. They look like trainers or something. Could there have been a passenger in the car? Could have been, I suppose. But where did he go? Search me. But we could have a murderer on the loose running around the Dublin mountains. Fabulous. Better get a gang of uniforms out to comb the area. Dogs, too. Moore got busy on her phone, getting whatever resources she could scrounge from the surrounding Garda stations. As the morning wore on, a watery sun was trying to break through the thin clouds overhead to warm the land below. Moore had sat back into the relative heat of Burke's Volvo to make the calls. Burke continued his exploration of the terrain around the crashed car. He made sure not to trample on any possible evidence, but he thought he could detect depressions in the soft ground leading away from the vehicle, where it looked as if someone might have taken off through the undergrowth and into the woods. Chapter 2. By mid-morning, the scene of the accident was buzzing. The two uniformed Gardaí, the first responders, had arrived back with hot drinks and doughnuts which had been eagerly consumed by Burke and Moore, who were feeling slightly warmer as a result. More squad cars arrived, carrying one or two uniformed officers in each, and a small white van had turned up carrying a dog handler and a very alert-looking German shepherd dog. Dr. O'Higgins had arrived as well, and together with two assistants, now clad in white scene-of-crime suits, all three were probing the area in fine detail. One of the men had retrieved the driver's wallet from his inside jacket pocket. It contained several credit cards, a driving licence, and a passport card, all in the name of Gerald McCranny. Both the driving licence and the passport card had a photo of the deceased, putting the identity of the driver beyond doubt. Burke approached the doctor. "What's the story, Doctor?" "The story, Inspector, is that you have a dead body. Can you give us something more? Time of death, cause of death?" "Given the vomit and the general state of the man, if you know what I mean, I'm not convinced that it was the crash that killed him. I need to do a proper examination, you know. Bloods, toxicology, that sort of thing," O'Higgins said. "Very well, Doctor. Let us know what you find." Moore had been listening to the conversation between the doctor and her boss. "What do you make of it, boss?" she said. "I'm not sure yet. Why couldn't it just be a straightforward car crash? I'm bloody freezing here," Burke said. An all-black Mercedes van with City Morgue written discreetly in gold lettering on the tailgate was parked nearby to receive the body, and a beaten-up old tow truck was standing off with its engine running to keep its occupants warm, ready to take the smashed BMW back to Garda station, where it would join several other crashed cars that were kept as evidence in other cases. "Did you get an address for him?" Burke asked Moore. "Yes, I did. Foxrock, no less." Foxrock is a posh suburb on the south side of Dublin where housing is at its most expensive. There is a small village of the same name, but most of the area is now sprinkled with detached houses in their own grounds and a few small gated estates where the well-to-do of Dublin reside in quiet, peaceful surroundings. "Strange thing is his house is called the Glebe. I thought that was religious or something," Moore said. It used to be. Land and buildings that were donated to the church in days gone by. But most of them are far too big these days, so they've been sold off. It's probably quite a nice old place. I wonder if he has much land. Dunno. We'll know soon enough. Burke briefed a sergeant who had taken control of the search and the dog handler, asking them to keep him posted if anything of significance developed. Moore and himself set off to break the news to McCranny's family. The glebe was indeed a fine residence, probably built in the latter part of the 19th century and set in almost an acre of manicured lawns and gardens. The house was accessed via a pair of wrought-iron gates standing open, set in granite pillars. A double-fronted building, in slightly austere grey stone, reflective of its original purpose, the house now boasted a bright yellow front door and had a large Mercedes 4x4 parked outside. Burke drove in and brought his car to a halt on the gravel. They both got out, and Burke rang the doorbell. A nice old ceramic bell push set in polished brass to the side of the entrance. They could hear the bell ringing deep inside the house. Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps advancing up the hall, and the door was opened by a thin, dark-haired woman in her mid-20s, dressed in a beige polo-neck sweater and blue jeans. "Mrs. McCranny?" Moore inquired. "Oh, no," the woman said, smiling. "She's in the kitchen. Who shall I say?" Burke offered his warrant card, and the girl became very serious, turning away and heading back down the long central corridor towards the back of the house. A moment later, a rather stout woman dressed in a floral-printed dress with a plain grey cardigan came up the hallway towards them. The woman appeared to be in her early to mid-50s, although she could have been younger, with short wavy hair that was shaded somewhere between blonde and grey. She was wearing rather too much makeup. "Mrs. McCranny," Burke said, stepping forward into the hall. "Yes? How can I help you?" "Is there somewhere we could have a word?" Burke said. "Yes, okay, come through," Mrs. McCranny said, concern now beginning to appear on her face. The detectives were shown into a spacious lounge, immaculately presented, with a very pale green carpet, 2 deep-cushioned settees, upholstered in a pale green brocade, and piped with gold, and an impressive corbelled marble fireplace, with shiny brass irons laid out precisely in front of it. A large gilt overmantel mirror reflected the generous velvet drapes that hung on the 2 casement windows opposite, topped with deep tasselled pelmets. A bow-fronted and highly polished mahogany sideboard standing between the windows, adorned with gleaming silverware of various kinds, completed the furnishings. "Please, take a seat. Can I arrange some tea or coffee?" "No, thanks, we're fine. Mrs. McCranny, may I ask where your husband is today?" Moore said. "He had a meeting in town. He left early. Why do you ask?" "Does your husband drive a black BMW, registration number 171D 265889? Moore continued. "Well, he has a black BMW, all right, but I don't know the number, I'm afraid. Why, what's all this about?" the woman said. "Mrs. McCranny, I'm very sorry to have to tell you that we came across a black BMW that had been involved in an accident up on the Blessington Road earlier this morning. We have reason to believe that your husband was the driver of the car, and I'm sorry to say he didn't survive," Burke said. "No, officer, you have that wrong. My husband is attending a meeting in the city. He has offices in Mayor Square on the Quays. It must be someone else." Burke looked uneasily at Moore. "Have you spoken to your husband since he left home this morning, Mrs. McCranny?" Moore said. "No, of course not. I told you he's in a meeting." "I wonder if you would mind calling his mobile now for us," she went on. The woman got up and strutted out of the room, unconvinced by what the detectives had told her. Burke whispered to his colleague, "What now?" Let's see what happens with the phone. Then we'll have to tell her about the driving licence and credit cards. Shh, here she comes. Mrs. McCranny came back into the room holding an iPhone in a pink leather case. She sat down on the edge of one of the sofas and dialed a contact from the list. After the phone at the other end rang a few times, Burke and Moore could hear that it had gone to voicemail. "He must still be in the meeting," the woman said confidently, cancelling the call. "Mrs. McCranny, I think you should know that we retrieved a wallet containing a driver's licence and some credit cards from the man who was driving the crashed BMW. They were in the name of Gerald McCranny," Moore said, as sympathetically as she could manage. "This is ridiculous. Where is the driver of the car now? Take me to him, and I'll prove to you that it is not my husband." The detectives began to doubt what they had discovered out on the Blessington Road themselves. Could they have somehow got it wrong? Could the driver be anyone other than McCranny? They hardly thought so. But it was going to be a tough one convincing the wife without her formally identifying the body, and they weren't ready for that yet. "Why don't we drive you into town to your husband's offices, Mrs. McCranny, and see if we can raise him there?" Moore said. "Yes, very well, good idea. I'll just tell Janine that I'm going out and get my coat." The woman got up and left the room for a second time. "Jesus, boss, this is going to be mighty awkward," Moore said when she had left the room. "I'll go in my car. You go with her and hers. As soon as I'm on my own, I'll call O'Higgins and tell him to have McCranny in a fit state to be identified. Then, when you can't reach hubby at the office, suggest to the woman that you go around to the morgue, okay?" "Yeah, I suppose. It's all we can do, really." Mrs. McCranny came back dressed for the outdoors and agreed to the configuration that Burke had suggested. The two vehicles set off in convoy, and when Burke got back out on the road, he called O'Higgins using the hands-free arrangement in his car. He explained the plan to the good doctor and went on to say, "And can you ask the forensic team to give McCranny's car a really good going over? I think there was someone with him, so we need any fingerprints, hair, samples, fibres, and what have you from the passenger's side." "Right, Inspector, I'll get them on to it right away. I saw the car going past on the low loader a few minutes ago." "Thanks, Doc. Moore and the wife should be with you in about 30 to 40 minutes. "OK, I'll be ready for them." Chapter 3. Burke was back at the office when Moore called him. "Jesus, boss, that was rough," she said. "I bet. What happened?" "Well, he wasn't at the office, obviously, so I asked her to accompany me to the morgue to eliminate the driver, like she said she would. O'Higgins had just about got him tidied up, and of course she identified him as her husband. I was lucky. I got Peggy Ryan, the liaison officer, to go back home with her until she can get some family around. She was in bits." "Why was Peggy in bits?" Burke said. "Ha, very funny. What do you want me to do now?" "Get back here as soon as you can. I want you to set up a murder room, you know, all the usual palaver." "OK, see you in a few minutes. But I need to grab something to eat on the way. Want anything brought back?" Moore asked. "Yeah, OK, thanks. Just a Sambo and a coffee. Cheers." Burke went to update Superintendent Heffernan while he was waiting for Fiona Moore to get back to the station. "OK, so what have we got so far?" Burke asked, when they were back in the office together. Moore had set up a whiteboard and opened a murder book on the computer system into which she had input some basic details about the case. "Well, McCranny wasn't where he was supposed to be, for starters, and I don't think he was alone either," Moore said. "Right. So who was he with, and why? Have forensics started working on the car yet? Anything doing?" Burke said. "They've started, but they won't have anything till around midday tomorrow, or so they say. Oh, and they did recover a mobile phone that looks as if it was McCranny's, but it's locked." "OK, we'll get the techies onto that. It might hold some information as to why he was where he was. I presume we haven't had any luck trying to find the passenger, if there was one." "No. Uniform are still searching the area, but it's heavily wooded, and there are just a few houses, so he or she could be anywhere. And I've asked Mrs. McCranny to come in tomorrow morning. We need to interview her about her husband, his friends and enemies, and so on. Right, well, you handle that then. I'm going around to his office first thing with a few uniforms. See if we can find out what he was up to in business terms. Let's leave it at that for this evening, then. Let the guys get on with it. What time is Mrs. McCranny coming in? Burke said. I suggested 12 o'clock, and she seemed okay with that. When they had finished their meeting, Burke left the office, but Moore stayed on a while updating the system and tidying away some papers that had collected during the day while she was out. She hadn't really anything to go home to. However, she was just about to leave when the sergeant who had been in charge of the men searching for the mysterious passenger from McCranny's car called her. "Hi, Fiona, it's Daniel here. We've had a good look around the area where the car went off the road. We've called to any of the houses that are occupied and scoured the woods in the immediate vicinity with dogs, but there's nothing. How sure are you that there was even a passenger in the car?" "Hi, Daniel. Not sure at all, to be honest, but thanks for having a good look for us. I guess you want to stand the men down at this stage." "Yes, it's bloody freezing out here, and it's getting dark now too, so it would be dangerous to continue. I think we'll call it a day." "Right, so thanks for your help anyway. You're welcome. Bye." After the call, Moore locked her PC screen, put on her jacket, scarf and overcoat, and went down to the car park to drive home in her Ford Focus. Her home was a rented apartment on the north side of Dublin, bordering Marino and Clontarf. The builder had managed to get it classified as the latter, so the value of his properties was enhanced. She was fortunate that it came with a designated parking space, and being a few years old, it was a bit more spacious than the current crop of shoe boxes, selling for enormous sums in the coveted Dublin 3 area. Moore stopped off at the Spar in Fairview and purchased a chilled chicken breast and some ready-peeled potatoes that would comprise her evening meal, supplemented by some frozen vegetables she had in the small compartment of her fridge. She still struggled with her weight, but was determined not to let herself get heavy again, as she had been as a teenager. When she had cooked and eaten her dinner, she sat back on the sofa and picked up the Northside News, a free newspaper that dropped into her letterbox once a week. "Look at me," she said to herself. "I'm a sad bitch. I'll have to get something going for myself. This is daft." Being late in the year, the paper was populated with advertisements for a generous supply of evening classes that were getting underway. As she perused the paper and scanned the ads for everything from a single session on flower arranging to an accredited degree in any of a host of fairly serious qualifications, an idea came to her. That could be a bit of a gas," she said, smiling to herself. She clipped a small rectangle out of the paper and put it in her handbag, with a view to following it up the next morning. Chapter 4. Dinny O'Leary's official title was Woodland Curator. At this time of year, most of the work that took place, thinning out the forest and harvesting the tall, straight softwood trees, was over. The giant machines that could fell, strip, and chop an entire tree into lorry-friendly lengths in a matter of seconds had long departed. For the winter months, Dinny's job involved attempting to keep the rabbits, squirrels, and other pests away from the saplings that had been planted during the long summer days, and making the outer perimeter secure. Privately owned vehicles were not permitted in the forested area, except by special arrangement, but stiles were positioned here and there around the fence to facilitate walkers and those who liked to study nature. At various places throughout the densely wooded terrain, small huts had been positioned that permitted the forestry workers to prepare hot drinks and take their lunch breaks. They were rudimentary structures, built of timber offcuts from the forest, with a corrugated iron roof, usually with a cast-iron stove installed, or occasionally a bottled gas cooker with 2 small burners. All around the huts, both inside and outside, notices warning of the dire
Sample complete. Ready to continue?